Hey everyone, and welcome to my year in books. I thought this would make a good video for the last one of 2019. It was sort of inspired by Goodreads, as they do a little bit of a year in books. So Goodreads tracks the books that you read throughout the year, and then at the end of the year it will give you a little bit of an overview. So books that you liked, books that you disliked, your longest book, your shortest book, and how many pages you've read overall. So this year I have read 33 books in total. Now, to some people that might sound a lot, to some people it might not sound a lot, but I'm not going to go through every single book that I've read this year, and you will see why in a second. But I'm going to go through most of them and just give a quick review, what I thought about the book, and just think about where I was in the year. So as well as Goodreads, I also use a planner to track what I've read. So this is the Owl Crate planner from the end of last year, and I've kept track of all the books that I've read in here, put a little bit of a review, and how many stars I gave it. So I thought that would be handy to have as a little bit of a reminder. I've also got my notes. I've made a few notes on all the books that I've read, just so I can remember what they were about, basically. So the first thing we need to do is to get all of the books that I've read this year so that I can show you them as we go through it. Now we need to get the books. These are the 33, well, they're not actually all of the 33 books because some of them are borrowed from the library and they're obviously back in the library. So these are the vast majority of the 33 books that I read this year. So I'm not actually going to go through all of them. I'm going to go through mainly these ones because these are all the Wicca and Witchcraft books that I read this year. As you can see, it's quite a significant chunk. So this year has been a really big year for me learning about Wicca and witchcraft, and as you can see, I've got a lot of books on the topic, so I really enjoy learning and reading about this sort of thing. So rather than me going through all of these books individually, I'm going to do a separate video in the new year on more of these kind of books for people that are interested in that. I have already done a video called Wicca and Witchcraft Books for Beginners, which features some of the books from this pile. So if you wanted to check that out, then I will put the link below, if I know how to do that. So that's those books. So we're going to start right back at the beginning of the year in January. And it actually links to this. So the first book I read at the beginning of the year was A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness. So it links to the Wicca and Witchcraft books. So I read this because the TV show was advertised and I thought it looked quite interesting. I always like to read the book before I watch a TV show or a film that is actually based on a book, because I find that the book is always better and I don't want the TV show to spoil it. So I haven't actually watched the TV show for this yet, and I only read the first one this year. So this book is actually the first in a series, so there's 2 other books which I do have. I got them for my birthday, but like I said, I've just not got around to reading those yet. I enjoyed this book a lot more than I thought I would, and I do really want to watch the TV show as well, so that's probably something that I need to get on next year. So I'm going to add that to my goal for next year, is to read the other 2 books that go with this and then watch the TV show. So yes, that's the first book that I read in January 2019, and I actually gave it 4 out of 5 stars, so that's not bad. Also, towards the beginning of the year, Owl Crate did a readathon. So they do these regularly throughout the year, and it's based around Owl Crate books. So this year, or when I did the readathon, it was to read a book that you'd had from Owl Crate the longest and the shortest book that you had from Owl Crate. So for me, that was Roseblood as the Owl Crate book that I'd had the longest and not read. And then the shortest book that I had from Owl Crate, which was Grace and Fury. So starting with Roseblood, by A.G. Howard. I actually got this in my owl crate in January 2017, so I've had it 2 years before I actually read it. Now, I did try to read it when I first got it, but I got past the first few chapters and then couldn't really get into it, so I did try again, and I did actually finish it this time. I did enjoy it. It's sort of a retelling, reimagining, or it's got links to. It's not a retelling or a reimagining. It's got links to Phantom of the Opera. And in the end I did actually really enjoy it, and I gave this one 3 stars out of 5. So for me, when I'm thinking about star ratings, 1 is obviously it's really bad, terrible. 2 is more meh, it's sort of okay. 3 is about average, like it's not good, it's not great, it's not bad, it's just sort of in the middle. Yeah, it's readable, yeah, that was okay. 4 is a really good book, I really enjoyed it. And to get 5 stars, it has to be something pretty amazing that I'm just like, wow, that book was amazing. So that's sort of how I work. So I gave this one 3, so like I say, it was sort of in the middle. So with Grace and Fury, it's by Tracy Banghart. And in my notes of my book review, I've put it definitely didn't hook me, and I was tempted to quit, but I finished it. So that's sort of where I was. I actually remember getting partway through and then asking some other people that had read it, is it worth sticking with? But I did stick with it to the end. And again, like I say, it was okay. There is a second one in this series that's coming out sort of next year, and I don't really think I want to read the next, so I suppose that tells you how I feel about it. Later in the year I actually read some poetry, so this is the poetry that I read throughout the year. So we've got Dragon Hearts by Nikita Gill, Amanda Lovelace and Trista Mattia. And this was my favourite one that I read in terms of poetry this year. It's a little bit of an anthology from these 3, and I just really, really loved every single poem in there. I already have all of Amanda Lovelace's poetry books. I have one by Nikita Gill. I don't have any others by Trista Mattia yet, but I want to own everything by those 3 because after reading this I just love all 3 of them. So yeah, what did I actually give this one? Dragon Hearts, I gave it 5 stars. So, like I said, 5 out of 5. Loved it. Okay, so the other 2 poetry books that I read were The Day Is Ready For You by Alison Malee and Pillow Thoughts by Courtney Papinel. Now I'm going to talk about these together because I read them both, I enjoyed them, but they didn't really stick with me after I'd read them, whereas with Dragon Hearts I still come back to quite a few of the poems in there, and I will post them on Instagram and things like that. But these ones, I enjoyed them while I was reading them, and they're like, especially this one was quite a quick read, but I didn't sort of feel it resonating with me afterwards. So what stars did I give them? So Pillow Thoughts I gave 3 stars, and I can't actually find that one at the moment, but I think I probably gave them both around 3 stars because it was, like I say, it was just average really. The next one that I read after the poetry, getting back to the novels, was Emily A. Duncan, Wicked Saints. So this was another Owl Crate one that we were sent this year. I really enjoyed this one. I loved the world that it was set in, and the magic system that was used, as it was something different. There were a lot of grey characters in there, so characters where you can't really tell if they're good or if they're bad, and your sort of perception of them is changing throughout. So that keeps it quite interesting right up until the end. There is a second book coming out in this series, so I do really want to read that this year. I gave that one 4 out of 5, so for me, that's a really good rating. Oh no, Bobo. Hello. Hi. Hi. In May, I read A Curse So Dark and Lonely by Bridget Kemmerer. This I saw everywhere on Instagram, and it sort of made me want to read it, which happens quite a lot. And it's a retelling of Beauty and the Beast, or a reimagining of Beauty and the Beast. So it is very sort of predictable. It's not really anything new. So you sort of know what's going to happen. It was a nice book. That's why I just sort of gave it 3 stars. It was just okay. There is a second one coming out soon, but I don't really have any major urge, or I don't feel like a major urge to read the second one. I may do, I may pick it up, but I don't feel like I'll be missing out if I don't. Hello, Pops. So after that one, I read Good Omens. So again, this was one that has been turned into a TV series. So I wanted to read the book before we watched the TV series. And this time I actually did both. So I read the book and we watched the TV series, and they were both really, really good. I enjoyed both of them. The idea of the story I really liked. It was sort of really original. And I think the casting as well in the TV show worked really well, and they portrayed the characters really well there. This one, Good Omens, I gave 5 stars. So this is only my second book that I've given 5 stars to this year. So far, Dragon Hearts, the poetry book, and Good Omens by Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman are the only books so far that have received 5 stars. So actually, this one I also give 5 stars to. This is a comic book. It's Buffy the Vampire Slayer comic book. Now it's not actually, there is a comic book that follows on, or there's been lots of comic books that follow on after the TV series, so it's sort of like season 8. But this one is actually going backwards. So it's, if you imagine season 1 of Buffy, so when they're all in high school, that sort of era, but it's set today, so set in, say, what, 2019, rather than the 90s. So it's what the characters would be like in today's world with like the technology and all that sort of stuff. So Cordelia is still the popular girl, but she's actually really nice to everybody. Xander is still a geek, but he's like into computer games and things like that. Willow is still Willow, but she's actually out as gay in the comic book in high school, which doesn't happen until she gets to college, sort of university in the TV series. For me as well, Buffy just sort of seems the same. It's not really much different. But yeah, I've given this 5 stars because I just thought it was amazing, because it's just very sort of nostalgia driven for me, because I love Buffy the Vampire Slayer and it's sort of going back to what it originally was. So I'm definitely going to read more when they come out. So 2 of the books that I read this year I actually borrowed from the local library, so I don't have them with me today. And they were Dragon Keeper and Dragon Haven by Robin Hobb, and they're part of the Rainwild Chronicles series. Now, it's actually my partner that really likes Robin Hobb, and he's got a lot of books of hers on the shelf. And I wanted to read Dragon Haven, or Dragon Keeper is the first one, sorry. I wanted to read Dragon Keeper because I really wanted to read something about dragons. And this one just stood out to me, and so I really enjoyed the first book. I actually gave it 5 stars, and the second one, I mean, I enjoyed as well, and there are more in the series, but I didn't really have any urge to sort of carry on after that. I wanted to read something else, so I may eventually come back to those. I did like the story and the idea, but I think I just got a little bit fed up with it after a while. Shock. The next things that I read was Stranger Things, Suspicious Minds. So this one is a prequel to this TV show, so I really love the TV show. I sort of became obsessed with it this year. And then when I saw that they were doing books that go with it, I had to obviously read them. I do usually find that tie-in books to TV series and things like that are usually really awful, but actually this one wasn't that bad. It's about what happens obviously before season 1, and it's the story of Eleven's mum when she's taking part in the programme that's happening at the lab that we see in season 1 of Stranger Things. So actually it's a good standalone novel as well, so even if you've not seen Stranger Things you could probably read this, and the story itself is actually quite intriguing. You don't need to have the link to Stranger Things itself. So yeah, it was, what did I give it? I gave it 3 out of 5 because, like I said, I appreciated it because it was linked to Stranger Things, but the tie-ins are not usually my sort of thing. We're sort of coming to the end of the year now, so you may think that there's been a bit of a jump, but you will see why, or I will explain why there was so much less reading, I suppose, at this point in the year. So the next thing I read, actually I've got these ones the wrong way around. So House of Salt and Sorrows by Erin A. Craig. So this is another Owl Crate book that we got this year. It had a lot of sort of unexpected twists, a little bit of randomness to it as well, but the sort of fairy tale element was there, and I really did appreciate that about it. So it was sort of a little bit sinister in places as well, and the setting I think was probably the thing that I loved most about this, because it was near the sea and the ocean, and it was about it being quite wild and destructive as well. So the setting really made this one. I did give this one 4 out of 5, so I did really enjoy it, but it just didn't quite make 5 stars. The next one then, I did sort of have a little bit of a gap between these two. There's probably about a month where I didn't read anything, and then we got The Bone Houses in an Owl Crate, and I'd seen this one online as well, and it was something that I'd wanted to read. And I've also read The Hearts We Sold by Emily Lloyd-Jones as well, and I really enjoyed that one when it came in an Owl Crate a few years ago. So I think I did put a lot of expectations on this one, and then that may be why I thought it was a little bit of a letdown. It was the storyline for me that didn't really hook me, or it wasn't something that I usually read about, I suppose. It was a book about, obviously, that one of the characters going on a journey, or I suppose 2 of the characters in this case were going on a journey and finding out about a curse. So it was good, but I think I just expected a lot more from it, and I preferred The Hearts We Sold. So if you have read The Bone Houses and you enjoyed it, or you want to try something different, then Emily Lloyd-Jones has also written The Hearts We Sold, and that was really good. So from around September until December, I had a huge reading slump, so I didn't read anything for about 4 months. For several reasons really. I just wasn't finding pleasure in reading. I didn't have the concentration, I suppose, that you need for reading. But then that all changed. So actually it brings me on to these books, which I have spoke about a lot. I do mention them a lot on Instagram. I have mentioned them on YouTube as well, and I've done unboxings and things. So it was actually The Queen of Nothing that got me out of my reading slump. So this arrived in November. It came out in November, and it came in the special edition Owl Crate box. And it was this book that actually got me out of the reading slump. So I started reading it at the beginning of December, and I finished it in a day. So I started it on a Sunday afternoon and finished it that evening, I suppose. So firstly, at the beginning of the year, in about February time, I read The Cruel Prince. I'd actually read it the year before, but I decided to reread it before I read Wicked King. So Wicked King came out in February, March time, and we actually went to Manchester to see Holly Black on her press tour, and she signed both of the books. So I read that. So then I had to wait from March all the way till November until Queen of Nothing actually came out. But it was definitely worth the wait. Because I really enjoyed this series and this book as well. So I think this is my favourite book of the year, my favourite series of the year, and it's actually one of my all-time favourite series as well. So I gave all the books 5 out of 5. If you're not sure what this one's about, Holly Black tends to write a lot about fairies. So it's about the Fey court and about all the trickery that goes on within the court. I know a lot of people have already read this, but it's definitely worth a read if you haven't. Okay, and then the last book of the year of 2019 that I'm currently just finishing is Winterwood by Shay Earnshaw. And if you just have a look where my bookmark is, I've literally just got a few pages left in there. So I'm going to finish that off tonight, ready to start a new book in 2020. This is also an Owl Crate book. It came in the November box, and I was looking forward to it as well, but it's actually been a little bit of a disappointment. As soon as I started reading it, when I got to about chapter 3, it became very predictable, and I'd already worked out what was going to happen. So I didn't really enjoy reading it after I'd already worked it out. I was kind of hoping as I was going along that I was wrong, that it was going to change, that it wasn't going where I thought it was going to go, but it did. And so it was slightly disappointing in that sense. So I would give this book about 2 to 3 stars, just because of the predictability nature of it. Shay Earnshaw also wrote The Wicked Deep, which is another book that I'm interested in. So even though I didn't really enjoy Winterwood, I still think that's something that I want to read. Okay, so that's the last book of 2019. So I'm going to start thinking about books that I want to read next year. So my plan is to put together a little bit of a to be read pile of all the books that I currently have that I've not actually read yet. So I'm hoping to do a new video on that in the new year. So if that's something that you'd be interested in, then make sure to subscribe and click on the bell if you want to know when that video comes out. Please let me know in the comments what you think about the books that I've read, if you've read any of them. Do you agree with what I've said? Do you disagree? What were your favourites? And if you've got any recommendations of things that you think I might like for next year. Thanks very much for watching, guys. I hope you have a happy new year and a really good 2020, and I will see you in the next video.